India's largest indigenously manufactured warship dedicated to the nation.
विक्रांत विशाल है, विराट है, विहंगम है.
Navy's 20,000 crore rupee dream realized in 2 decades.
As the flag bearer of Indian Navy's unwavering commitment to Honorable Pradhan Mantriji's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat,
Asaduddin Owaisi asks, why delay the 3rd aircraft carrier?
हमको तीसरा एयरक्राफ्ट कैरियर चाहिए, उसकी इजाजत क्यों नहीं दे रहे हैं? 200 शिप की जरूरत है, हमारे पास सिर्फ 130 है, क्यों नहीं दे रहे इसका परमिशन?
Can India afford a 3rd aircraft carrier? Is the 3rd aircraft carrier a 43,000-ton target for enemy missiles? Aircraft carrier or nuclear submarines? Will India need to choose? That's our top focus on India First. It is the dawn of India's naval power in the 21st century. Launching its maiden indigenously designed and built aircraft carrier INS Vikrant, India of course has now joined an elite league of select few naval powers, and the ship has now been commissioned. She's all set to sail. Of course, the next few months will also see trials with fighter jets on board. But India is just the 3rd navy to have commissioned a domestically built aircraft carrier in the past 3 years. Here's a look at Indian Navy's latest prized possession. An aircraft carrier made in India, a floating airfield, 45,000 tons of war muscle, INS Vikrant, the pride of India, has joined the Indian Navy's fleet. This next-generation aircraft carrier, the largest warship ever built in India's maritime history, was commissioned in Kochi by Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday.
जोरदार तालियों के साथ आइए स्वागत करते हैं भारतीय नौसेना में आईएनएस विक्रांत का.
विक्रांत विशाल है, विराट है, विहंगम है. विक्रांत विशिष्ट है, विक्रांत विशेष भी है. विक्रांत केवल एक युद्धपोत नहीं है, ये 21वीं सदी के भारत के परिश्रम, प्रतिभा, प्रभाव और प्रतिबद्धता का प्रमाण है. The entry of India's biggest Swadeshi warship into the Navy is a huge push for Atmanirbhar Bharat. The induction of the aircraft carrier is key to India's maritime interests, especially in the Indo-Pacific region, with a belligerent China attempting to widen its reach.
हम हमारी कलेक्टिव सिक्योरिटी की जरूरतों को पूरा करने में पूरी तरह से सक्षम हैं. हम एक फ्री, ओपन एंड इनक्लूसिव इंडो पैसिफिक में विश्वास रखते हैं. इस संबंध में हमारे प्रयास माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के विजन सागर यानी सिक्योरिटी एंड ग्रोथ फॉर ऑल इन द रीजन से गाइडेड है.
The aircraft carrier, housing state-of-the-art automation features, a crew of over 1,700 officers and sailors, and capacity to hold up to 12 fighter jets and 6 helicopters. This is a floating airfield and a city in itself.
We can see the 2 runways very clearly from here. This will give you an idea how exactly air operations will take place. The round circles with numbers, that says 3, it says 2, 1, those are meant for helicopters to be stationed, and the 2 runways are divided in between with a white lining. One is the red one, the other is the yellow one. 2 runways are there. One is a shorter one, the other a longer one. The shorter one for operations to be launched quickly when the aircraft can fly without a payload. But if an offensive operation is to be launched with a heavy payload, that's when the longer runway has to be used. It's still going to take at least 4 months for air operations to start on INS Vikrant.
A special welcome was given to the new warship from the air, a flypast by helicopters and fighter jets in the presence of Prime Minister Modi and other dignitaries. The brand new aircraft carrier is named after its illustrious predecessor, the original INS Vikrant, that played a defining role in India's war with Pakistan in 1971. Today, India screams Shano Varuna. May the gods of the oceans be auspicious unto us. With Abhishek Bhalla in Kochi, Bureau Report, India Today.
The commissioning of Swadeshi INS Vikrant is a proud feat for every Indian, but perhaps not for our political leaders who are busy claiming credit for this warship. Congress claimed that the BJP had ignored UPA's contribution to this project. The BJP hit back. Listen to what this entire issue is all about.
The glory, the pride, the majesty. A day of overwhelming emotion for the Indian Navy and national pride for every Indian citizen. The stunning entry into service of India's biggest Swadeshi warship, INS Vikrant.
जो देश जितना आत्मनिर्भर है, वो उतना ही सशक्त है.
But as the aircraft carrier was being commissioned, a familiar Swadeshi politics was busy erupting. The first shot was fired by the Congress's media chief Jairam Ramesh, where he taunted Prime Minister Modi, wondering if Congress-led governments in the past would be acknowledged for their role in the Vikrant project, triggering a credit war over the warship.
20-22 साल लगे हैं डिजाइन करने में, मैन्युफैक्चर करने में, ट्रायल करने में. तो ये सब अगर आप आईएनएस विक्रांत का मील पत्थर देखें, ये 1999 में शुरू होता है और कमीशन आज हुआ है. आज के प्रधानमंत्री तो फोटो लेंगे, बड़े बड़े भाषण देंगे और कहेंगे मैं आया 2014 में, ये सब शुरुआत हुई. ये बिल्कुल गलत है.
There was a near immediate counter from the ruling BJP with a sarcastic snipe at the unpleasant matters in defense that the Congress should really be taking credit for. The two tweets triggered a familiar tutu meme in the backdrop of the beautiful ceremony in Kochi. And then when Prime Minister Modi unveiled the Indian Navy's new flag, one that gets rid of St. George's Cross, it was an opportunity for the BJP to front foot and launch its attack. Obliquely blaming Nehru's leadership and the Congress-led UPA for failing to get rid of the colonial-era relic. The BJP's firebrand Bengaluru MP added ammo to the attack with this tweet, blaming what he called the Congress's slavish colonial mindset for its decision to allow the return of the St. George's Cross. Meanwhile, Asaduddin Owaisi has questioned whether the government will sanction a third aircraft carrier.
हमको तीसरा एयरक्राफ्ट कैरियर चाहिए, उसकी इजाजत क्यों नहीं दे रहे हैं? उसी नेवी में हमको 200 शिप की जरूरत है, हमारे पास सिर्फ 130 है. क्यों नहीं दे रहे इसका परमिशन? इसलिए नहीं दे रहे प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी क्योंकि उन्होंने भारत की इकोनॉमी को अपने गलत पॉलिसियों की वजह से बर्बाद कर दिया. उनके पास पैसे नहीं है.
Politics never has a day off in our democracy, and for a project as prestigious as Vikrant, it's hardly surprising that a war for credit and a fight to blame has broken out. But may we just say that on a day like today, those who deserve credit above all the politics and bickering, are the men and women of the Indian Navy's Naval Design Bureau. The builders, welders, skilled tradespersons of the Cochin Shipyard Limited. the relentless workers and engineers at the Steel Authority of India Limited, and countless other organizations big and small that have fought impossible odds to deliver India's first home-built aircraft carrier. With Abhishek Bhalla in Kochi, Bureau Report, India Today.
It is a historic day for India today. The Navy is rejoicing and so is the nation. But which opposition leader worth his salt would leave an opportunity to target the government on such an important day? 2 missiles have been fired. One by Jairam Ramesh of the Congress party and the other by AIMIM leader and Member of Parliament Asaduddin Owaisi. Let's get both the air warriors and the sea warriors to respond on merit. Joining me on India First is Vice Admiral A.K. Singh. He's a submariner par excellence and former Flag Officer Commanding-in-Chief of Indian Navy's Eastern Naval Command. Also with me is Air Marshal P.S. Ahluwalia, a former Air Officer Commanding-in-Chief of the Western Air Command. Both these officers were in service when the Kargil war was fought, and they know what needs to be done to keep their force fighting fit. Admiral Singh, I want to begin by asking you, Asaduddin Owaisi is saying this is the right time. Why is the government not clearing the 3rd aircraft carrier? Sir, is this a political bob, or in your view, does India need a 3rd aircraft carrier?
Look, I don't want to get into any politics, but if you ask me a question about whether we require a 3rd aircraft carrier, we do. But whether the funding is there or not, that's for the government of India to decide. I mean, but as a naval guy, we require much more than a 3rd aircraft carrier. We need nuclear submarines, we need so many other things. But it's for the government of India to decide, and I don't want to get into any political discussion with any political leader.
Oh, absolutely. And that is why on India First, like the show, we keep the nation first. No political leader on this broadcast, on this particular show. Our conversation is only with military veterans who understand every nuance of our force, of the threat, and of effective countermeasures that need to be taken. Air Marshal Ahluwalia, 20,000 crore rupees, we are told, is the cost of INS Vikrant. Now a 65,000 ton displacement aircraft carrier. That's the proposal. 65,000 ton, perhaps INS or IAC Vishal. That would be far more expensive. Sir, in your appreciation, do we need a 3rd aircraft carrier for sea control?
I would go along with the Navy if they feel, as per their threat perception, they need another aircraft carrier. However, I'll qualify that by saying that we need to make realistic threat assessments. That goes for the Army and that goes for the Navy and also for the Air Force. Because money will not be ever-ending. The tap will close somewhere down the line. So therefore, we need to make realistic assessments, reassess the threat, and accordingly, I feel that we need to downgrade the resources that we have, which should be technologically, state of the art, and they should be able to deliver much more than what the equipment 10 years ago was able to do. So that's the question now, that will we reassess the threat? Will we be more realistic? Do we think that we're going to have the kind of wars that we had in the past, our conventional wars in, our other wars in? What is it going to be? And accordingly, we'll have to...
So in India First, we're looking at solutions. Let's move beyond the academic debate. Admiral Singh, this concept of sea control versus the concept of sea denial, you understand both. You've been a submariner par excellence all your life. Do we need sea control, or do we need effective sea denial given the nature of threat? And let's indulge in some plain speak. China with its aircraft carriers, China with its submarines, China trying to come into the Indian Ocean region. What do we need? Do we need more nuclear submarines to target the enemy aircraft carrier? Because the enemy also has his carrier killer missiles. So would our 20,000 ton displacement INS Vikrant actually be sitting duck, let's say, for an enemy Dongfeng 21?
So, Gaurav, first of all, I agree with Air Marshal Ahluwalia, my postmate. I absolutely agree with him that, look, it's for each service to decide what they want, and thereafter it's for the government to decide what the funding. Now, in theory, absolutely theoretically speaking, but with our kind of resources likely to be available, the Indian Navy would be looking at a certain limited amount of sea control for a limited amount of time in a limited space against whatever the PLA Navy can deploy in the Indian Ocean region. Secondly, we definitely need nuclear submarines to target their aircraft carrier battle group, and we need nuclear submarines to operate in the Western Pacific. So we need both. Now, there's an ideal figure how many we require of both for sea control and sea denial. And incidentally, in sea denial, we also require the Air Force with their fighter aircraft and their own air-launched missiles. Everything is required. We require sea mines. Everything is required. But then if you don't have the kind of money, then the government has to scale down from what is the ideal requirement to what can they afford. But at the same time, they cannot keep sitting on this decision for years and years. The PLA Navy will be here in much larger strength in a few years from now. They already have 3-4 ships and a submarine in the Indian Ocean region all the time, and they'll have double and triple that strength, and even the Pakistan Navy is growing now.
Sir, that's a very pertinent point you make. So let's break this down in numbers and let's indulge in some plain speak before I bring in Air Marshal Ahluwalia once again. Admiral A.K. Singh, in your view, you know the ground reality, you know the availability of funds, you know Air Force requirement for more Rafales, you know Army's requirement, you know the Navy's requirement. Can India afford a third aircraft carrier at this stage? Because also weigh in the fact that Navy says of the 20,000 crore that was spent on INS Vikrant, about 75% was plowed back in the economy to boost the economy within the country. So can we afford to do that? Do we need to do that? Or do we need to get a nuclear submarine or maybe longer range missiles?
Look, first of all, we require. I definitely don't deny that the Air Force and Army require what they require. They are also highly professional people, so I'm not going to comment on what they require. I can only say the Navy has to, within its resources, decide. First of all, we need those 26 fighters for this new aircraft carrier, Vikrant. And thereafter, if you can't afford 6 nuclear submarines, can you cut down to 3 or 4? And if you can't afford a 65,000-ton aircraft carrier, can you cut it down to a 50,000-ton aircraft carrier? And if you can't afford a catapult launch and recovery aircraft carrier, can you cut it down to Stobar, which is what Vikrant is? Instead of 40,000 tons, can you make it 50 or 55,000 tons? Well, moving to put a EMOL system, you have to pay another $2 billion more for it. So it depends. There's a choice which the professionals in naval headquarters will have to make. But they have to reduce their targets definitely as to what they need. Ideally,
okay,
we definitely require a third aircraft carrier. Ideally, we require 6 nuclear attack submarines. Ideally, we require mine countermeasure vessels. Ideally, require drones for long-range drones for maritime reconnaissance. We require
Air Marshal Ahluwalia, a floating airbase is quick response in any area compared to fighter jets, even with mid-air refuelers, flying all the way from India's shores. An aircraft carrier, let's say in South China Sea, it sends across a very clear message for freedom of navigation patrol, an effective message. Isn't that far more effective than flying a shore-based aircraft with mid-air refuelers from India?
Certainly, the aircraft carriers are meant for power projection. They're meant to operate away from your own maritime borders to whatever is existing in the area of threat. However, having said that, the most important thing is that we need to be realistic in our threat assessment. These are all numbers that we're talking about. Do you think we have a threat from the east coast of Africa to perhaps Australia on the other side? If that be so, the list will be never ending. So therefore, I expect that the Air Force will review its own force levels relative to what the realistic threat is going to be in the future. And more importantly, induct into that the technology factor, which will then give you a combat potential which 20 squadrons will be equivalent to 40 squadrons. And the same way the Navy has to get down to realistic figures, because what we are talking about, just like Admiral A.K. Singh said, that we need a host of equipment for the Navy. Is it practical? No. And if it's not practical, then we better get realistic and get down to a force level that has more combat potential at a lesser cost, and be prepared for a quick reaction if it's required to protect our maritime assets or even land assets.
Very pertinent point you make there, and Admiral A.K. Singh, let's be practical, is what Air Marshal Ahluwalia says, very politely indicating that perhaps a third aircraft carrier may not be as practical as maybe more shore-based aircraft with mid-air refuelers, longer-range missiles, nuclear submarines. Look for an option that fits our budget better.
Look, Gaurav, first of all, I agree with Air Marshal Ahluwalia that we've got to make a threat assessment, and I'm very sure the Air Headquarters and the Naval Headquarters have made their threat assessments. They have cut down, they made a priority list. I'm very sure of that. But having said that, you know, navies and air forces don't come cheap. They are high-tech services, both of them, and they cost a lot of money. The nation will have to be willing to spend a little more than, they'll have to raise the defense budget by a little more than what they have right now. Australia, just look at Australia, 8 nuclear submarines, 9 frigates, he's going to spend over $100 billion US. So these things cost money. Now, if you want to keep a budget at whatever 2% of your GDP or 2.3%, including pensions, etc., I'm sorry, Marshal Ahluwalia and I can be discussing for the next 1 year. But if there's no money, if there's no increase in budget, then even this minimal requirement, minimal increase of 1 or 2 extra units here or there, I'm talking about the Navy, will not be possible. With the present budget, it will not be possible.
Okay. Okay. But Air Marshal Ahluwalia, let me put this question to you. Would a 45,000-ton displacement aircraft carrier or a bigger aircraft carrier that we are looking at, maybe 55,000 or 65,000-ton displacement aircraft carrier, be a huge target for an enemy incoming missile or his fighter jets?
Let there be no doubt about this, that it will be a huge target from the air. Okay, we know what the target from other naval forces would be, surface forces would be. There's no doubt that it is vulnerable. But it is even more vulnerable from the air. I have done this, I have flown plenty of missions simulating the vulnerability, and it is vulnerable. And therefore, you have systematic air defense equipment on board. You have a whole battle task force which will be able to protect the aircraft carrier not only from the air but also from the water surface. So therefore, the question of being vulnerable is there, but more importantly, you will be able to protect yourself from the air undoubtedly.
Okay. So in case your aircraft carrier is more vulnerable despite a carrier battle group with its submarines, with its destroyers, with its frigates, with its P-8Is, my question to you, Admiral A.K. Singh, is wouldn't purchasing, if you have a limited budget, wouldn't purchasing nuclear submarines, a nuclear attack submarine, be more effective as far as the Navy is concerned? Invest more in a nuclear submarine because you also effectively deny that sea to the adversary.
Look, in our case, Gaurav, we are supposed to be a balanced Navy, but if you're talking about there being no funding, frankly, I would have been the happiest person in the world if the Prime Minister today had announced that he is going to allow indigenous production of nuclear submarines. We have the capability of indigenously producing nuclear submarines. It's just there the funding is required. So if the funding is available, it depends. You may not be able to afford the numbers the Navy wants, then at least give them bare minimum, which you can do. And thereafter, as far as the aviation goes, like I said, the immediate priority for them is the 26 fighter aircraft.
Yes. Now, immediately after these 26 fighter aircraft for INS Vikrant, what would, according to you, be top priority? Because there is a must do, a could do and should do. So yes, you should have an aircraft carrier, another aircraft carrier, and you must have the carrier battle group and the works. But a must have, if you had to choose between an aircraft carrier battle group and a nuclear submarine, I'm sorry it's an unfair question since you're a submariner, but you know, as a flag officer commanding in chief, what would you rather have?
Look, Gaurav, I've worn both the hats. I've been fleet commander, I've commanded submarine squadrons, I've commanded surface ships, I've commanded carrier battle group, I've commanded submarines. I've seen both the sides. Now, in a balanced Navy, you need both. Now, the question is, we have 2 aircraft carriers. Can you afford a third? If you can, we definitely need a third. Can you reduce the size of the aircraft carrier to reduce the cost? That's for the professionals to decide. Do you need nuclear submarine? Of course you need nuclear submarine. If you want to track the Chinese task force in the Indian Ocean region for 45 days, 60 days at a stretch without being detected yourself, you require SSN. You want to protect a carrier battle group, you require SSN about 100 miles ahead of the group. You want to deploy in the Western Pacific and put China's aircraft carriers and shipping under threat in their own waters, you require SSN. Why do you think Australia is going in for 8 SSNs? But then you require money for it.
You've made your point very effectively, and the writing clearly is on the wall. Effective sea denial to the adversary, whether in the Indian Ocean region or the Pacific Ocean region or in China Sea, wherever a nuclear attack submarine is something that would be feared, that would give you an edge. For joining me here on this India Today special broadcast, Air Marshal P.S. Ahluwalia and Admiral A.K. Singh, as always, many thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will continue to track developments on the story very closely, but that is all I have time for on India First this evening. Have a lovely weekend. Abha Bakaya comes up next with Business Today.